13 Tijuana police officers who were jailed for a year and a half for allegedly working for drug cartels have been freed. They were released because there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute them. The case has called into question what had been seen as an unprecedented crusade in Tijuana to fight police corruption. TijuanaPress.com editor Vicente Calderon and KPBS border reporter Amy Isackson brings us this story.
When Miguel Messina and 24 other Tijuana police officers were arrested a year and a half ago, it was big news.
At the time, Tijuana's police chief, Julian Leizaola, was rounding up dozens of policemen on his force who he suspected moonlighted for drug cartels.
The mistreatment of prisoners at Guantanamo. We suffered practically the same.
Messina had been home from jail for less than 24 hours when he agreed to tell us about his arrest back in March 2009. He says he and the other officers were at the usual morning briefing. Chief Leizaola hauled them off. He turned them over to the Mexican army in Tijuana. Messina says the soldiers taped their eyes shut and tortured them for days.
In hundreds of pages of depositions, officer after officer says soldiers put plastic bags over their heads to suffocate them and applied electric shocks to their genitals.
Humiliation, beatings. They put a gun to my chest and said, "You're done. We're going to kill you and dump your body in the street to make it seem like a drug cartel hit." All I could do was think of my family.
Pues yo lo único que llegué a pensar en ese momento fue mi familia.
Messina had been a Tijuana policeman for 3 decades before he was arrested. He rose to be a district chief and was applauded for his work. This photo shows Tijuana's mayor praising Messina for his accomplishments just 2 months before he was arrested. In this photo, Messina stands with Chief Leizaola, a man he thought would save police in Tijuana.
I admired him like you can't imagine. He wasn't intimidated by anything. He was like a superhero, almost like Superman for me. But that all changed when he was promoted.
Leizaola was tapped to be Tijuana's top cop back in 2008. That's when his anti-corruption crusade kicked in. Messina says one of his colleagues was swept up and wrongly accused. Messina complained. 4 days later, he himself was arrested in what he thinks was retribution. Messina says his former superhero, Leizaola, stood by as he and the other officers were tortured.
The soldier said, "You want to be a tough guy? Well, go for it." And they suffocated me. After a couple of rounds, they saw it wasn't going to get me to talk, so they tried to get me to sign a confession they'd written. I said no. They beat me more. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. My vision got cloudy, and I passed out.
Messina thought he had a heart attack. Eventually, he and the other 24 officers were flown to a prison in southern Mexico, where they were incarcerated for a year and a half.
One of the first things many of the police did when they got back to Tijuana was come here to City Hall. They want their jobs back. The mayor says no.
The municipal police should be absolutely free of any suspicion.
Tijuana Mayor Jorge Ramos has helped kick 450 officers off the force for alleged ties to organized crime. He counts that as one of his major successes.
Messina and the other 12 officers are not the only ones that say that Leizaola or the military tortured them. There's complaints from other police officers and civilians.
The military is Mexican President Felipe Calderon's teeth in this war on drugs. Human rights complaints like these are one of the chief arguments against the use of the army. Calderon says there's no proof that soldiers have committed abuses. Jose Maria Ramos studies public safety at COLEF, a think tank in Tijuana. He says there's little public outcry.
En esa desesperación avalan ese tipo de prácticas.
People are so desperate because of all the kidnappings and mutilation, they justify those kinds of practices.
But David Shirk, who directs the Transborder Institute at the University of San Diego, says that attitude is risky.
If the government sort of stoops to the level of torture and intimidation, the same level that organized crime groups use, the government is no better.
Shirk says this case exposes the weakness of the Mexican government's strategy in the drug war.
Bringing in a strong man to sort of take the lead and play Batman is not necessarily the best way to accomplish counter-corruption on a police force. You need to have effective internal investigations. You need to have the ability for witnesses and evidence to be put forward in a systematic way that protects those who are making allegations against corrupt officials. And those mechanisms, frankly, do not exist or are not as well developed in Mexico as they should be.
Shirk worries the U.S. government isn't paying enough attention either. Millions of dollars in U.S. federal aid to Mexico are contingent on Mexico respecting civil liberties. Shirk says Congress hasn't withheld any funding, and it's more convenient for them to look the other way because Mexico's drug war is showing some results.
Este periodo de sesiones sobre seguridad pública y derechos humanos en Tijuana, Baja California, México.
The highest human rights court in the Western Hemisphere, the Inter-American Commission, is investigating the 25 officers' torture claims. One persistent advocate for these officers is Miguel Messina's daughter, Blanca, whose story we brought you last year. She's since gone into hiding because her life was threatened. She spoke with us by phone from her hiding spot.
A man put a gun to my head. He even called me by name. What happened, Blanquita? We agreed you'd quit complaining. You want to die? You want to lose a relative?
Blanca is ecstatic that her father has been released, but she continues to fight for his good name and for the others who are still jailed. Amy Isackson, KPBS News.
Vicente Calderon, TijuanaPress.com.